I'm Jessica Lombard, Associate Superintendent.
And I'm Superintendent John Berkey, and this is Huntley 158 Today. Well, Jessica, today we have a very special show. As I think everyone knows, we're just a couple of days away from Veterans Day, a day when we honor all of those who are serving and have served our country in the service. And today we have very special guests. We have some veterans who have served for the United States before.
Absolutely, and we thank you again for your service. And I'd like to introduce each of you and then ask each of you to go ahead and tell a little bit about your background, what branch you served in, and when you served. So today we have Al, Warren, and Bob. So again, welcome and thank you so much. Al, why don't we start with you? Go ahead and tell us about your background in the service, where you served, and what branch you were in.
Well, I went to the University of Denver in Colorado. It was an ROTC, so I left there with a commission, second lieutenant, went right to flight training. My initial goal was to become an airline pilot. That but put aside later on, you'll hear later. But anyway, so I went through pilot training and went into aerovac. I don't know if pictures are allowed, but here's a picture of the aircraft that I flew. It's the civilian Convair 240. It was a C-131. It was my dream airplane. In high school, I saw this airplane, United Airlines, and I thought, oh, someday I can fly that airplane. So anyway, I spent 10 years in the Air Force, got in 57, left in 67, accumulated almost 10,000 hours of flying, most of it in the Convair, and it was wonderful duty. It was aerovac. We picked up patients that were brought in on C-141s from the Orient, Japan and Vietnam and all of that, and then we'd shuttle them around to points of specialty care. So we were basically a feeder airline. So I got excellent flying experience in preparation for my ultimate goal of airlines, which I never got there. So that's briefly my background.
Bob, tell us about when you served and where.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you asking me, really. It truly is an honor. I was a message center chief in Europe. My job was, well, first of all, I was up on the Czech border in what we define as the bastards battalions. And what those were battalions spread up along the Czech front and the Polish front, and we were supposed to be protecting if the Russians jumped the border, it was our job to stall, keep going back until we hit our MLR, which was the main line of resistance. Being a message center chief, it was up to me to decode all coded messages that came in, maybe from the president or from Washington, D.C., or USAR headquarters giving us instructions what we were to do, and I would pass that on to our commanding officers. It was different.
What years were you in?
I was during the Korean War, and
So the early 50s?
yeah, 53 and 54. I was in Europe when the Korean War ended, and how I thank God that I got to go to Europe instead of, to Korea, because I lost some friends there. And that was a crazy war.
So Warren, you were in World War II, right?
Yes,
Tell us about that, when you were in and where you served.
I was at school at Cornell University, Ithaca, New York, in engineering, and rather than wait for a draft, I enlisted as an aviation cadet, went through pilot training, got my wings at West Point in April 44C was my class, April of 44. Immediately went into B-17 transition training, and then I was sent to pick up my own crew to go to Europe as a B-17 pilot. About that time, they said, no, we don't need you so much. So he sent me out to Grand Island, Nebraska to be a co-pilot on a B-29. We trained there, went overseas. We were stationed on Tinian Island, the same island that the Enola Gay that dropped the atomic bomb was stationed. and I was a member of the 6th Bomb Group, 39th Squadron, and flew bombing missions against Japan.
This guy really is. I never forget, he told me one time, you know, Bob, here I was, a 19-year-old teenager, really, in charge. They gave me this plane and the responsibility for all the men on it. It's hard for guys or kids to realize that today. He had responsibility.
So did you fly over Japan? Missions that actually
22
went?
missions over Japan.
Okay. Did you go from an aircraft carrier or
No, no,
directly from the island?
Tinian
From
Island,
the island? Okay.
in the Marianas groups. Guam, Tinian, and Saipan.
Okay. How long did it take to fly to get to
We
Japan
had
and back?
12, 14-hour missions over water from the time we took off until we hit Japan.
And then back again, obviously.
Right.
Took.
I like to tell a story, if I might.
Please.
Absolutely.
Please.
We are over Tokyo on a bombing run, and before the 29s went in, they'd send a Pathfinder, we called it. It was a plane that laid down bombs, fire bombs, so that the rest of us following maybe an hour later could see where to bomb. So we were flying up there, hit our initial point, which was Mount Fujiyama, turned towards the target, which was Tokyo, saw the fire bombs down the center of Tokyo, and in the meantime, the flak and searchlights were coming up, and our pilot, who was a 23-year-old married man with 2 kids, said, George, who was our bombardier, said, George, let's try to hit the suburbs. And George and I in one voice said, no, we came here to fight the Japanese, We're going right down the middle. And we did. And George was 19, bombardier. I was co-pilot at 19. And I always tell the story, that's why they fight wars with teenagers instead of 20, 30-year-old married men.
Question came up in the class. They said, well, why, the kids would ask us, why did they take 18, 19-year-old kids? And I simply said, there's a reason for that. You take a 19-year-old kid or an 18-year-old, take that hill. The only reply is, where do you want us to start? You get a 35-year-old man, he's going to say, hey, wait a minute, let's sit down and talk this over. You know, really, that was the whole philosophy.
Were you still in the Pacific at the time of the end of the war?
Yes, a matter of fact, our crew had been chosen for a lead crew train. They were going to bomb Japan and pattern bomber, they called it, as they did in Europe, where you have a lead plane and everybody in the formation was there. When the lead plane opened its bomb bays, the rest of them would open the bomb bays. Lead plane drop his bombs, all the rest of the bombardiers would drop their bombs. So we were back training to be lead crew planes. So we were back, and we were in Muroc Desert in California, training to be the lead crew. I came back, and we are at Tinian, and Tinian was where the Enola Gay and its squadron of 15 planes were stationed. All their planes in their area was surrounded with barbed wire, submachine guns, guards standing there, and we wondered, what's all this about? Well, in our conversations, we're never allowed to talk about atoms. That was something strange and new. So we really didn't know the atomic bomb was going to be dropped until the day of Hiroshima came about, and then Nagasaki afterward.
So how did you feel when that got dropped? Was there a sense of relief that there wouldn't have to be a full invasion of the Japanese islands? Or
Greatest thing that President Truman ever did was to drop the atomic bomb. And John Ari, the history teacher in middle school, has we veterans out and talked to him, and they asked questions. And the questions, one of the veterans had 6 or 8 kids around in a room, and I had maybe 5 or 6 groups over a period of 3 hours. And one of the main questions was, what do you think about the atomic bomb? And I tell them, just as I told you, greatest thing Truman ever did. And they said, why was that? And I said, because it saved thousands, if not millions of lives. Japanese lives from the time the Japanese were small until they were adults. They were dedicated to the emperor and would fight to the death. And if we ever had an invasion, and we were accumulating troops in the Pacific to invade Japan, ground troops, and had they gone in and invaded, literally millions of Americans would have died. So the dropping of the atomic bomb saved millions of Japanese lives and millions of American lives.
How long did you stay in the service after the war ended?
I had enough points and I got out. I got out as soon as I returned to the States.
Okay. What did you do when you came back for a career?
I went back to college, get my engineering degree at Cornell.
Okay. And then what did you do for a
And
job
then,
after that?
Interviewed various companies and finally ended up and went to work for a company as an industrial engineer.
Okay.
I ended up only 3 companies in my entire career, and I ended up as vice president of Alice Chalmers.
Oh, great. Okay.
And I happen to be in charge of the combines. Do you know what a combine is? Okay. For those that might be watching, combine is in the field, and he not only cuts and gathers and threshes corn, wheat, and innumerable products, and then puts them into a bin in the back of the combine and threshes the rest out the back. I was in charge of the combine division in Independence, Missouri, and I retired from that job.
So how did you end up in Huntley?
After 54 years of marriage, my wife contracted lung disease and then brain cancer and died. She died of brain cancer and I was left alone. Never felt so lonely in my entire life. And all my kids thought I'd be marrying some young bimbo. But actually, and I did because I contacted one of my wife's best friends and a friend of mine, a classmate of mine, Troward High School, married this woman, and we double dated. Our kids knew each other, and Pete died about the same time my wife died, and so a year or two later, I met Maxine. I married her 17 years ago.
Well, thank you very much for telling your stories, Warren, and just want to say to all of our viewers, this is actually going to be a 2-part episode, and we are going to talk to Al and Bob in more depth about their experiences in the military. But again, I want to thank all 3 of you, and all 3 will be back for more. Thank you for watching Huntley 158 today from a destination school district
Where it's all students, always.